Hi guys, I'm Jade, and today I'm going to talk to you about the journey I went through to go from severe OCD suffering through to today where OCD plays a very small role in my life, what recovery feels like, the different stages I went through, roadblocks I faced, the times I thought I was recovered but perhaps wasn't. And yeah, sorry that I haven't been here for a while. If you usually like to watch my videos, it's been a crazy time with my young children, hence why I am sitting in my car today, because I had a few minutes available and I thought that I would jump in and talk to you. So in terms of background on my situation, I'm 34 years old now, and I first started suffering with extreme OCD when I was around 13, with just really upsetting intrusive thoughts that just hit me almost out of nowhere. It was like a light switch was just clicked and there was no going back. And I know a lot of you guys can relate to this because it can happen so suddenly like that. I'd always had OCD there from about age 5. I remember just feeling different. I felt weird a lot of the time. I felt strange. I remember getting quite nasty anxiety even from as young as 3 and 4. I just remember those very unsettling, nauseous feelings of anxiety. And yeah, so it's always had been a part of me. And I suffered really badly from 13 to 17. And then at 17, something happened that another switch must have flicked, perhaps because it ramped up to just all consuming, and life was just extremely challenging to even get through the day. So the reason I want to share a few examples of how bad things got for me is so that you can feel motivated and inspired that no matter how bad it is, it's not hopeless. You can achieve a life that you want. I always remember my dream in life being if I could just get through the day with my brain like kind of at peace and not noisy and just leaving me alone for a second. That would be my dream come true. I didn't want anything more than that. I didn't need love, a family, anything at all. I was like, that's all I want. That would be absolute bliss for me. And so when I used to hear people complain about the type of challenges that I now complain about, I used to think, I can't imagine ever complaining about that. Like, you must be so happy and so blissful to be, have the brain that you have. And I would give anything to swap brains with you. And today, I do mostly, like, all day have the same feeling that you get. You know, when you first wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my gosh, it's finally gone. I've had a good sleep and it's gone. Whatever this was, it's gone. I feel like that all day. So I feel like that right now. I've got that fresh feeling that you get when you first wake up before the intrusive thoughts hit. That's my base level feeling. And so the difference between what many think is OCD recovery and what it actually is, we're not saying that, well, I'm not saying that I found a cure for OCD, because I definitely still have an OCD brain. My brain is wired in a way that a person with OCD's brain is wired. And I notice that from time to time, and I'll share some examples of how that comes up today. But in a general sense, my brain is calm, and the fear activators, all the prefrontal cortex stuff, and if anyone's ever seen like a heat map of the brain, someone without OCD just has this activity there most of the time, but someone with OCD has got this activity all over the place, all at the front, really, firing off, misfiring, and alarm threat systems going off when they don't need to be. Mine feel generally calm, and I'm going to share how I got there. So just to rewind quickly, at my worst, I lived my entire life in avoidance, and I was living in a box basically. My whole life was based around compulsions and avoidance and rumination. So at my absolute worst, I'm very slim, and I lost about 2 or 3 stone at my worst. So I felt a lot of social pressure as well about eating and stuff, because it was like, well, why are you so thin and why are you not eating? But my intrusive thoughts, I had no appetite because I just felt so sick all the time, so disgusted at myself. Just that constant chronic shame, guilt, fear, terror was just constant. And so in order to escape that, I would overwork, I would go out on the weekends to have a few drinks as a form of escape. And so being at work or being out and having a couple of drinks and then sleeping all weekend, that was my life. So to people around me, it seemed quite normal, because if I was at work, I couldn't encounter triggers, because the work that I'd set up was like a safe place. Like I knew my office, I knew the safe zones, and my route to work was really controlled, and the times at which I would travel, anything that I'd be exposed to. I never looked at newspapers, I never watched the news, I never listened to the radio. I boxed my entire life into OCD's demands, and that felt pretty good for 2 years or 3 years maybe, in the sense of I was able to escape. Other than like sitting with my own brain, I was able to escape triggers. What I didn't know at the time was that that was building this absolute mountain of OCD, like hideousness, because I was training my brain. So every time I avoided walking past a school or reading a newspaper headline, I was training my brain, that is dangerous. You need to be afraid of that. And your fear is legitimate, and it's right for you to be scared. So what that does is, like, imagine if you had like a lock and you had a screwdriver, not a screwdriver, like the thing that tightens things. I don't know what they're called. And you're like constantly tightening the lock, and you're just literally like to the point of no return, where you and then it becomes rusty, and then if you any attempts to undo the lock just results in your item, whatever it's called, breaking in half and snapping, and then it's just completely locked. That's what I was doing. I was training my brain that there's danger here, you need to be afraid. So if you're currently doing this, the first step is to be very honest with yourself, because I could find myself lost in weeks, months, years of just reassuring myself that this was normal. Now, it's really important to highlight here that for 12 years I didn't actually know I had OCD, and unfortunately this signals the lack of awareness in our society about OCD and what it is. Now, also that the the times are different now. So when I was 13, I mean, it wasn't normal to go for therapy. When I was 20, it wasn't normal to go for therapy, because we're talking like 14 years ago. Um, so it wasn't talked about as much. We didn't have social media. So sadly, I only found the OCD Recovery Instagram page when I was 31, 30. And like if I had been 20 and on Instagram, I think I would have found out what was going on for me a lot sooner. Um, so I've not, to put in perspective, I've only heard of a couple of instances where OCD has manifested worse than it did for me. So it was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. And I always like to try and remember that, how that felt, to resonate with some of you guys who may be struggling really badly, so that I can keep helping to raise awareness that you can get better. It it does feel quite strange thinking back that that was actually me in my life. Um, it was wild. I've said this before in videos, so apologies if you've watched them before, but I just can't believe what the brain can like allow you to go through. I just can't get my head around it, how bad it was, and for no one to know as well. That was insane. Like nobody knew, and it was just unbelievable. And I felt alone. I felt that I was weird and gross and different and icky, and I felt all rotted inside, and I felt like there was a dead body in my garden, and no one else knew about it but me, and I put them there. And it's so hard to explain to people that literally nothing's actually happened, but I live in a state of terror. It's unbelievable. And because it latches to real things and real thoughts and different issues in the world or whatever, it just feels so real. So I want to outline how unconditional self and life acceptance was the missing piece for me and why those tools are, in my belief, the answer to OCD recovery, and the missing piece that led me to realize that there was another level beyond what I thought getting better was. So let me first explain what I thought better was. So when I had my first child, I had severe postnatal OCD and relating to my little girl, and it was just I think I probably felt depression as well because of the joy that was taken out of that time. And I had CBT therapy, which was really helpful in the sense that I moved from a place of just 24/7 terror and disgust at myself and confusion and all those awful feelings to, oh wow, I've got OCD. I didn't even know what this was. I can now function every day in life. I can get by. It still definitely bothers me. I still have 3-4 day episodes where the OCD is really bad when I've been triggered. And yeah, but this is as best it's going to get. I am still borderline depressed because it's so hard living, but in general, I can get through and I understand and I know it's just my OCD, even though I can't stop it, like I know. And so it would kind of be like every month or so, like, oh, yeah, I'm having a really rough patch right now. But, keep going, keep riding the waves. A better days coming in a few weeks. And then I would feel better for a couple of weeks and then it would take me down again. And that's because I hadn't worked on the underlying fears. And there is a common misconception about working on the core fears in OCD, because it can sound like, well, hang on a minute, isn't that a compulsion? Isn't delving into the fear a compulsion? But that never was a concern for me because I knew that when we're set exposures to do things linked to our theme, I knew that, well, you kind of have to go there with the theme because otherwise you can't build your recovery around that. So what I learned over time was that the basics that I had done, which was, first of all, identify I've got OCD. Okay, wow, this is game changing. This is what OCD is. This is why I've got it. This is how it works. Second of all, was doing lots of exposures. I will highlight that I definitely wasn't doing enough exposures. Exposures, I think people kind of do, 6 or 8 weeks of couple of exposures here and there and they're like, why aren't I better? Exposure therapy has to be intense. In my opinion, it has to be full on, intense. Obviously guided with someone who can help you with that, to help you understand how much to do and what types to do. But for me, it was I really, really went for it, and it was hundreds, if not thousands, of exposures before I started to get better. So that was a key component. I think exposure is probably 50% of the work. And then 20% of it was leaving it alone and stopping ruminating as far as I could, i.e., exiting the conversation in my mind. So it's as many times as OCD tries to pull me into that cycle, I can feel myself drawn in, but I'm exiting this. Okay, you're pulling me back in. I'm exiting this. You're pulling me back in. No, I'm not doing this. And yeah, it is hard, but just as much as possible, I would keep getting on with my day and not let OCD stop me. So a question I used to ask myself a lot in recovery was, would I say no to this if I didn't have OCD? And if the answer was no, you wouldn't say no to it, I would do it. So I would never let OCD make a decision for me. And that's a really great way to build exposures into your life organically. So refusing to say no to things, no matter how terrified you are, making peace that I'm really not going to enjoy this event, but I'm going anyway, and it's going to be great for my OCD recovery journey in the long term, and really kind of communicating with that future self that you want to be. Who do I want to be in 5 years? Do I want to be still doing this and feeling this? Or do I want to be someone who is out there living the life that I want, not shackled by fear, not controlled by OCD? And back to that honesty, is that honesty am I really happy and am I really doing the work? Because it's easy to slip into a 6 month, okay, I'll just, this is just the way it is, I can't get better, I tried. Usually people are terrified to make that first step into even looking at the fears and even going into them. So let me explain to you why I'd gotten 60-70% to recovery when I decided to look at rational thinking and unconditional self and life acceptance. I had recognized I had OCD. I understood how it worked, and I would leave it alone and I would do exposures. But because I was still terrified of the scenarios that OCD was latching to, it wasn't going anywhere. And I think a lot of people can relate to this because they're saying to their therapists, oh yeah, my friend just drove past, he didn't even see me. They can relate to this because they're with a therapist and they're like, oh no, I'm doing that, but it's not working. They're like, oh, you just need to do more exposures then. But because they've never experienced it, a lot of therapists, they don't realize that you are so terrified of it that it doesn't matter how much you expose yourself to it, you're still terrified. So it will bring it down a bit. And I'm talking about severe OCD cases. Like I know people who've suffered with anxiety just in my family life who I've literally helped. I passed them the Paul David at Last Alive book and they're like cured. They're like sorted out. They're like, oh right, I didn't realize all this stuff I was doing and all I need to do is welcome it in and now it's gone. And it's like, wow, I wish I was like that. So for many people, CBT therapy, some work on recognizing thoughts of thoughts, not ruminating anymore and stopping the compulsions will work, but it just didn't for me. So if you're in the category of severe OCD and you're like me and you're finding that it's only taking you so far, that's what I'm talking about. It's just this other level. So unconditional self and life acceptance is the basic theory of I really wouldn't want what I'm fearing to be true or to happen. Wouldn't be desirable at all. But even if it did, it wouldn't be like as terrible as I imagine, and I can make peace with that scenario. That sounds like I'm making it sound really easy, but if it's the worst fear you could possibly imagine, then that just sounds impossible. I want you to picture someone else's fear that you're not afraid of. So, for example, I am not afraid of contamination OCD, not scared of it at all. So if you told me the scenario, oh, you touched a toilet and then you picked up this really rare disease and you were hospitalized for 6 months, my genuine reaction is, oh, that would be really unfortunate. Like, that would be really horrible. I really don't want that. But it wouldn't affect me in any way other than to not want it, like a rational response. People without OCD have naturally rational responses to things. They recognize the probability is very low for something bad to happen. So even if, this sounds gross, even if by accident someone without OCD went to the bathroom and forgot to wash their hands, they're not noticing it. They've just forgotten. They're not thinking about it. It's not a rational response to panic that you're going to catch a rare disease and die as a result of that. But a person with contamination OCD, that's very real. And they say, yeah, but you could get a disease from that. So this is completely rational and normal, but it isn't. It just isn't. That's what the disorder is. So really try and picture a scenario that doesn't scare you. Maybe you're not scared of breaking up with your partner. You don't have ROCD. You can't imagine why someone would be so terrified of being in the wrong relationship. And so this is how to start viewing your scenario. You can go even deeper than that. Let's look at somebody who has actually committed a severe crime and is in prison for that and is just living their life. They've done something really wrong. They possibly feel a huge amount of remorse and guilt, but there are many things in life that can be turned around. Maybe they work on themselves and then help future young offenders to change their ways. Maybe they get to read 20 books a month they wouldn't have otherwise read if they weren't in prison. Maybe they get a deeper perspective on life as a result of the shame and societal being pushed out of society as a result of their crime. Maybe they find a deeper sense of purpose. Maybe they meet people who have done similar things to them and they find new purpose in life. The same with the Viktor Frankl book, Man's Search for Meaning. He was in concentration camps during the World War II and he suffered horrific, terrible times. But he talks in that book, and if you haven't read it, please read it. He talks in that book of the deeper perspectives on life that he was able to gain from understanding the absolute depths of suffering. And, you could apply that to fears such as, a mother losing her child. Like that to me is possibly the worst thing I can imagine happening in reality. but it has happened to people and it will happen to people again. So it's really looking at breaking down what are these things that I'm fearing, making peace that we don't want them to happen, but even if they did, they don't deserve the volume of concern I am giving them. So we're training our brain to respond to them in the same way that a person without OCD would react. So no way am I ever going to sit here and go, oh yeah, it'd be fine if my child was taken from me, because of course it wouldn't. I would not want it. It's the last thing in the world I want, but I'm not going to allow my OCD brain to catastrophize it, because that's, oh my gosh, where's the sun come from? You don't plan for this when you do videos, that the sun's just going to change. And I found that really useful, this concept of helping my brain to see things in the same way that a person without OCD sees them. You can't rationalize with OCD. You can't just say, oh, it's just a thought, leave it alone. You have to give it the tools. You have to give yourself the tools to fully change your brain, radically overhaul your brain. What's so lovely about this is that I would say it took me about 12 months to really become more rational around my fears. Um, a really great simple example that I've given before is around raw chicken. I was really panicked at times. It didn't latch horrendously, but the idea of ever eating raw chicken, I was like, I will be in hospital on a drip, and that terrified me. I was able to pretty quickly use unconditional life acceptance on that one to like eradicate that fear almost immediately, because oh gosh, sorry about this. I immediately was like, okay, if I eat the raw chicken, what happens? Okay, you'll be really ill in hospital. Not ideal. Don't really want it. There we go. And the fear beneath that was because I was so thin from not eating because of OCD. It was like, oh my gosh, I can't afford to get a sickness bug and be seriously ill, because then I'll be even more thin, and then people are going to comment even more on my weight and keep grabbing me and telling me I need to eat a sandwich and I'm too thin. And then I realized that was societal rejection, was the fear. People are going to do this, people are going to think this, people are going to say that. It doesn't matter. So once I could make peace with, it doesn't matter what anyone says, thinks, does, I can still be at peace. I don't want it, but I can still live. And so that is the basis of it all. So once you can identify what is the core fear, like with POCD, probably more than likely is societal shame and not wanting to be an outcast in society. So removing the need for approval from others, and maybe some shame attacks and that type of work can really help too. So just to summarize now where I am today to finish this video, so that you can have hope for what life can be like after a lot of work. And I just want to stress, a lot of hard work. And I'm going to be really honest, a high amount of people watching this, and a high amount of people who say, yeah, I want, I'm going to work on OCD recovery, aren't going to put in the work. And you have to decide, like, am I the person who's going to end watching this video and just go back to what I was doing before and getting the same results and having another 20 years living like this? Or are you going to be the person to go, I'm going to put the work in, I am not doing this anymore? Because that's what I did. I was like, I'm not having it. This is not the life I wanted. I want my life to be fulfilling, joyful, challenging, all the things that we associate with life, but I'm not having this. There's no way I'm living like this. And you've got to have that grit and not give up and not fall into forums and wanting to talk to other people who are like you and wanting to feel like you're not alone so much that it just drags you into this, like, oh, it's okay, oh, we all get those days. Like, support from others is helpful, but if it's keeping you there, you do need someone to say, hey, do you know what, you need to get out there and you need to do the work, because constantly talking about it is not helping you. You're just keeping yourself stuck. So it was a lot of work. I'm talking like going to places that I didn't think possible. I'm talking dragging myself up in the morning, feeling worse than I've ever felt, and still doing 10 exposures that day. Like, just absolutely obliterating myself. And I'm not saying like it wasn't dangerous. It was just like, I'm not giving up on this. And that is what it can take. And people tend to give up because they're like, oh, this is too hard and I don't even have confidence it's going to work. So that's why I want to talk about the things I've done, so that you can have that confidence that it can work, but it takes a lot of work. So don't give up. How I feel today. Okay, feel right now, I feel a deep sense of peace. There is no worry. There's nothing I'm thinking about right now. Like I'm looking at the trees and the birds and the cars going past, and it's peaceful. It's a brain without OCD, essentially. And it's really nice. I think I probably appreciate it more than people who've never experienced severe OCD suffering, because I could be sitting in the park with a friend and be like, isn't this magic? Isn't this amazing? And they're like, yeah, it's nice. Because it's like to sit there, not have constant extreme rumination is like incredible. Now, I went through a little phase of thinking, oh, I don't have OCD anymore. I'm exactly like everyone else. And that was challenging because you kind of forget to uphold things. So the work that I have to do today is to remain rational and to not ever let myself slip into any avoidance behaviors. So if I see something that can be triggering, it's not that I it's not that I don't get triggered anymore. It's a lot harder to trigger me now. It's more that the responses are turning way down. It's very infrequent that I'm actually triggered at all. It's very short lived, and my brain automatically diffuses the fear. So there's no compulsive disputing going on. In fact, I don't dispute. If you've heard about disputing irrational beliefs in order to help make peace with the worst case scenario, I don't do that anymore. My brain just does it for me. So if my relationship OCD would crop up, for example, like if my husband did or said something, I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to leave him. My brain, I don't think it, my brain just disarms it, because it's like, well, why would that mean you need to give it leave? Like it would just be rational. It's so hard to explain. It's almost like the OCD alert system goes on and then goes, oh yeah, there's nothing to worry about there. It's kind of like that. Every now and then, like every couple of months, maybe I get a little bit more latched onto something and I have to either maybe have a check-in one-to-one. I've had one-to-one with the OCD recovery team in the last 12-18 months, just one, where I was like, oh, am I freaking out here? But do you know what? I hadn't slept for 6 months. I was having real difficulties with, my children being so small and exhausted, and it was just I was becoming a little bit irrational again. But in a general sense, day to day, all is well. And that feeling of peace is really nice. It's really enjoyable. It's really lovely to just, yeah, be where I wanted to be and feeling happy in a general sense. And I now have to pinch myself with the issues that I face in life that are more aligned with like normal life issues, like my kids making a mess everywhere. This stuff is hard, like, but I have such a great perspective on it, and I'm able to help so many of my friends with the similar challenges they're facing with young kids, because life challenges, normal life challenges, are absolutely nothing in comparison with the depths of OCD suffering. And it can be frustrating, because I'm now a person who has had OCD and has now not got it as a big part of my life. And I kind of want people to know just how bad OCD was, because I'm like, wow, yeah, you've got it so much easier than us if you don't have OCD, but everyone's going to have something, and maybe they're suffering in other ways that we don't know. So I'm definitely not angry about OCD anymore. I have a lot of perspective on it as well. I know there's things that are way worse than OCD suffering, in the sense of like, we think it's like the be all and end all to have OCD. My OCD will never go fully, just because it's the way my brain's wired, but I have perspective that that is not the worst thing in the world. Sometimes my brain's going to go into overdrive here and there, and I have the coping skills to deal with that. But I want to highlight the difference. I'm not suffering chronically with OCD anymore at all. It rears its head in the sense of, oh, there goes the brain again. Okay. And I genuinely, it never impacts my day. It never stops me doing anything. It never leads me to miss a meal. It never leads me to, the course of my day has not been changed by OCD for 12-18 months. Ever. I've never done something different as a result of it. I've never gone to bed early or been really upset or gone into a hole. at all. It might turn on a little bit and I have to work on being rational every now and then, but yeah, doesn't affect life in the way that it did by any stretch. So I hope that's been useful for you. Please leave any questions in the comments. If there's anything you would like me to specifically talk about, just write in the comments your question and I will, on my next video, record something for you. And please keep going. Like, don't fall into the trap of thinking that there's no hope. And I would just highlight that OCD recovery is in stages. You move forward, you move back a bit, you move forward more, you move back lots more. Just, you have to keep going. And there will always be someone who has felt how you feel and is feeling how you feel. And taking it into your own hands, deciding that this is not the life that you want, deciding that you want more, and viewing it like you would training for a marathon. Like, it's not overnight, but it's really important to be disciplined and keep going. And have a great rest of your day. Bye.